everyone. I'm Dr. Angela Puca, and welcome to my symposium. I'm a PhD and religious studies scholar, and this is your online resource for the academic study of magic, paganism, esotericism, shamanism, Thelema, and all things occult. Today we have a special guest, Marco Visconti. And before we start, I'd like to remind you that this project of delivering free academic knowledge to the public and freely on social media and YouTube can only exist thanks to your support. So if you have the means and can help at all, I would really appreciate it if you'd consider support my work with a one-off PayPal donation by joining memberships or my inner symposium on Patreon. You will find all the links in the info box and in a pinned comment. And you can also super thank me now in case you want to support my work. So thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy this interview. Welcome everybody to this episode, another episode of Academic plus Practitioner in Conversation. And today we have a special guest, Marco Visconti, a fellow Italian who I knew from before I was an academic. And
Yes.
yes. And I'm really pleased to have you here, Marco. Thank you for accepting my invitation to be on Angela's Symposium, first of all.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me, Angela. Good to see you again after so many years.
Yes.
I think like last time we met, it was back in Italy, one of the many Pagan Pride days or Esoterica conferences. Back when, like this was the very beginning of maybe like this new magical revival that we've been experiencing in the last few years. So, I mean, first of all, let me congratulate you for your channel. It's fantastic. It's
Thank you very much.
really great. And I think you're doing a fantastic job at bridging that divide between really practitioners and those academics that study the history of occultism and esotericism. It's really needed. So thank you.
Oh, that's really nice of you. So would you like to share something about your background in esotericism?
Yes, of course. I define myself as a Thelemic magician. And so let's unpack that a little bit, what it means. Thelemic, of course, comes from Thelema, which is this Greek word that means wheel. And it is, in fact, the word that denotes a magical religious movement that was started by the notorious occultist Aleistercrowley in 1904. It is very contentious if we want to call it a religion or not. Some people would say it's a religion. It definitely has a lot of religious elements. It has religious rituals. But at the same time, Crowley himself never really wanted to go all the way in that direction. Even if he fancied himself as, the prophet of the new eon, and even if did channel a new Bible, if you want to say, like a religious text, a volume of the sacred law called Liber Alve Legis, or the Book of the Law. And then again, in later years, in his writings, especially in the book called Magic Without Tears, he would say, well, maybe we shouldn't call it a religion. This is more for the uninitiated. And so, what is Thelema? It is a very multifaceted system of beliefs and of practices that are focused on fundamentally two steps in personal initiation. The first one is to achieve the knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, which is a theme that you find across the Western esoteric tradition. This idea of getting in touch with your algoides, if you want to use like a term coming from the Greek again, or your divine self. Some people describe it as the higher self, harkening back a little bit to psychology. I don't know if that's correct, but let's say this divine spark that's hidden inside all of us. And once you have unlocked this union, then you're able to pretty much move on with your magic and more towards a more mystical set of practices that are very reminiscent of non-dualism, and the kind of non-dualism that you find in Tibetan Buddhism, for instance, Dzogchen practices, or even Tantra. And so it's a very, I would say, like, it's very full of different practices that you can approach, and a lot of it a lot of those practices are magical in nature. And by magical, I mean with the K. So Crowley was the one who added the K to the term magic he said in order to differentiate it from stage magician. And so the idea that, in fact, magic with the K is the proper tool of Thelema. As maybe you could say that, deep meditation is the proper tool for Buddhism. I'm generalizing here, apologies, but just to give you an idea. Then magic with the K, it's the proper tool to fully unpack the mysteries that are hidden in Thelema itself. And of course, being Crowley, there is a lot of sexual magic and sexual practices embedded in the system.
With Crowley being Crowley and all.
Exactly. Yeah, I would say that, it's definitely interesting to understand that, exactly, Crowley being someone who, if nobody here knows, he comes from, he came from a very strict Christian family. He was born into a Plymouth Brethren family, and especially an even stricter sect of a sect called the Exclusive Brethren. So a kind of Christians that really believed that everything that they needed to know was in the Bible. They couldn't read anything else, and they were just waiting for the rapture, pretty much, right? So there was a lot of sexual frustration, build up into that system, and so of course Crowley tried to fight against it. We could speak about Crowley forever here. It was a very, very complex character, multifaceted character. It wasn't an iconoclast just for the sake of being that. Like, he really tried to make sense of the kind of life he was born into and make it better and try to reach for this higher self. And he thought that a way to reach this higher self was through sexual practices. Do we do sexual practices in Thelema nowadays? Well, yes, but unfortunately not in the way, not in the way that most people think we do. A lot of the sexual practices in Thelema are sublimated, you approach them by allegory, by all sorts of symbols, and there are some direct practices that involve proper sex of various kinds, right? But that's not something you start out with, right? And I'm saying this because over the last almost 30 years that I've been a Thelemite, which tells you how old I am, the discourse around Thelema has changed substantially. When I first started in the 90s, it was really all about, let's see how dark we can get, because Crowley, of course, also has this, I would say, ill-deserved fame of being an evil Satanist. He wasn't, in any shape or form. Thelema has a Luciferian aspect to it, which is echoed into its iconoclasm, or even in the idea that, we don't need a savior anymore, right? We don't need somebody like Jesus Christ or to come and save us for our sins. In Thelema, there is no sin, and there's no vicarious atonement. Like, nobody's going to come and save us. We are the ones who, through these magical practices, can unlock the union with the Holy Guardian Angel, and through that union, make sense of our experience in this world, and maybe, opening up the gates for other worlds to explore. So it wasn't, that was like the Satanism of Crowley, because in many ways, it echoes the Luciferian principle of non serviam, like not being the subject of higher power. I think I'm rambling. I went places already.
No, I think it's actually very interesting. And how did you get into Thelema and the OTO?
Oh wow, that's a story. Okay, let me.
In the 90s, apparently, you just mentioned that. I didn't know.
We're going back to the very beginning of the 90s. Pretty much around this time in 1990. So some 32 years ago. Oh God, I was very young. I was 12 at the time, and I was already interested in mythology, and I was already interested in, a few years later, I would discover goth music and metal music. So I was already, going in that direction, right? But that summer, I discovered Aleister Crowley in a comic book. In Italy, I don't know if you ever chanced upon it, but there is a series of comic books called Martin Mystère, which is a sort of like, Indiana Jones or kind of character, right? He's an anthropologist, but he also has a TV show. Possibly, maybe if they were writing in this day, he would have a YouTube channel, right? And but it's also like a sort of like this kind of Indiana Jones character. And actually, he's written by this guy called Alfredo Castelli, which is also connected to a guy called Sebastiano Fusco in Italy, which is a very well-known esotericist, somebody who's been writing about the esoteric forever. So you can imagine there's a lot of real esoterica in his comic books. And I was like reading this comic book, and there you go, you have this Aleister Crowley character. And I was like, oh wow, that's a fascinating character. And I started I was a bit of a bookworm back when I was young, very young, and I started investigating. And there you go. In Italy, we had very little esoteric books available, but we had Crowley. We had Magick in Theory and Practice, which is Crowley's magnum opus, and it was actually the only Crowley book that was translated in Italian. And at the time, I already could speak English, but it was before Amazon, before everything. You couldn't really get a hold of any foreign books. So I just bought Magick in Theory and Practice, which in Italian just called Magick, and I didn't understand a single thing that was in it because
it's really
Magick
complicated.
It is a very complicated text. It's interesting because, as you read it, right? So Crowley writes this at the end of the 1920s. It is published for the first time by Leghorn Press in 1929. And at that point, he is very advanced in his magical practice, but he is trying to, with Magick in Theory and Practice, is trying to write a book for everyone. In the introduction, it says, the magic will be...
Magic is for all, yeah.
For all, and magic will be, the banner word whereby the pugilist and the banker and the common person will be able to rally behind. That didn't work out very well because the book then from there goes to absolute, complex places. And as you can imagine, I couldn't understand any of that. Interesting enough, that edition was the 1972 edition by John Simons and Kenneth Grant, edited by them, and it was translated by someone, I don't know who, for Astrolabio. Well, the translator could not understand bits and pieces, so it just did not translate it. Like if you get the book, you will see that there's,
I have it here actually, the Italian version. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly, right? Like you read and then it jumps from one sentence to the other. Say, well, something must be missing here, right? Yes, because the guy couldn't make sense of what it is. And that just gives you an idea of how magic is very complex. To be fair, for if there's any Italians listening to this right now, there's been a new edition coming out that has been translated by the members of Ordo Templiorientis, OTO, the organization you just mentioned before, and we will discuss it shortly. And it's fantastic. They did an outstanding job. It is, we finally, as Italians, we can say we finally have a proper translation of Magick in Theory and Practice.
Yep.
Took 32 years. I mean, took way longer because, you've got to go back to, it took 50 years because go back to 72, right? But yeah, we finally have it. So that's where I start. From that point onward, I try to make sense of that book. One thing that happens is that Astrolabio also translated the first two books by Kenneth Grant, and Kenneth Grant was one of Crowley's disciples that really took Thelema in very different directions, as you should do, I think. It's important for a living tradition to evolve and go different places so that, different practitioners can experiment with different things. One of the core ideas of Thelema is that of scientific illuminism, which means trying to pretty much apply the method of science to the aim, and towards the aim of religion. The aim of religion being trying to understand who we are, where we're going, the ontological questions of humanity. But try to apply the method of science. Well, say instead of just say magic works because it works, well, lay out experiments and see what can be reproduced by me, by others. If it's, if what I can reproduce, you can do it as well, etc. So I really believe in the idea of, taking traditions to different places. Grant really took them in very different places, incorporating the Cthulhu mythos of H.P. Lovecraft, incorporating ufology, incorporating the work of Austin Osman Spare and magic as art. I mean, it's if anybody is curious about Kenneth Grant, definitely look into it. It's an interesting character. So yes, I went from Crowley to Kenneth Grant, and then fast forward a few years. It's the late 90s now, and I just applied to become a member of one of Crowley's organizations, which is the AA. The AA stands for, at least in the outer, stands for Argenteum Astrum, or Astron Argon, which means silver star, and it is the magical order, whereby you go to learn magic. Okay. Crowley founded it at the beginning of the 1900s as a continuation of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Crowley did start in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and at some point, through all the schisms and infighting that these orders always invariably devolve into, he was left to his own devices, and for some years he became a Buddhist. For some years he just left magic behind, up until something called him back, which was the reception of the Book of the Law, this reception of Thelema as a new magical system, possibly as a new religion. And from that point onwards, he decided to restructure the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn into this new order called the AA. That's where I joined around late 90s, thanks to a very strange group of people that were operating in Rome at the time, and then I became aware of another order called the OTO, or ordotempliorientis, which means Order of the Temple of the East, or Order of the Oriental Templars. And at the time, I didn't join because this is more like early 2000s. I just got in touch with some people there. Interesting enough, at the local goth club, a jungle club, which was as it happens from time to time, right? But it wasn't the right match. And so I keep being a Thelemite, I keep being a member of the AA, but I go and do other things, right? I keep experiencing different magical practices and magical traditions up until, again, 10 years later. We were now at the beginning of the 2010s. I finally joined the OTO, and I've been in the OTO up until the recent years. I was first initiated in Rome, and then when I moved here in London, I joined Ameth Lodge here in London. I would become the treasurer of Ameth Lodge, so I ended up becoming very intimate with how the system works beyond just initiation, how I would say the nitty-gritty of running an order, when you have to chase people after dues, and when you have to pay for the temple room, etc., etc., etc. And then eventually I left the OTO for various reasons, and I wrote about it. Maybe, if somebody's interested, I can send them the links of why I left. And now I'm just a solitary Thelemite. Well, I organize my own things. I'm writing a book. I wrote a book, actually. It's coming out. And so, yes, that's my story, pretty much. If you want to know more about the OTO, I can tell you more about it. Because
I'd like to know more both about the AA and the OTO, but we can start with the OTO first in terms of what you can share, about the initiation process, the structure of the order.
Of course. So, I would say that OTO is definitely the most famous of Thelemic orders out there. Like, if you Google Crowley magic, maybe you will find a lot of OTO references. The reason why it's because the OTO was always the order that was in control of Crowley literary estate. So every time you would buy a book, going back from the 70s onwards, right? You would buy a book, you would find, if you want to know more, contact the OTO here. So, while it was not the first, and while in fact the OTO was not founded by Crowley inherited it. That's why it became maybe so popular, at least in the minds of those who see Thelema from the outside. The OTO was founded, in fact, by a group of German Freemasons and Rosicrucians, and it wasn't up until the time that Crowley joined, first as a, he first joined in 1907, if I'm not mistaken, because as a Freemason himself, he was recognized at a certain degree. This is something that happens a lot in Freemasonry, or at least it used to happen a lot in Freemasonry, and that is that if you already are initiated, if you already went to a curriculum of degrees, as long as you can demonstrate that maybe you know the password or the passgrip and the token, etc., you would be recognized as the same degree or an equivalent degree in the new system you're joining, right? And this is what happened with Crowley. At the time, Crowley was a 33rd degree of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, and so when he was introduced to Theodore Royce, which was one of the founders of OTO, Theodore Royce recognized him as a 7th degree at OTO, because that was the same level of correspondence. It's fascinating. Like, you can lay out all these things on very interesting diagrams, and it takes a little while, but then you start recognizing some patterns there. Fast forward a few years, 1912, the legend says that Theodore Royce barged into Crowley's rooms in London, accusing him of stealing the secrets of the OTO, of the higher degrees, of the highest degree of the OTO, which was the 9th degree. Crowley was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And at that point, Theodore Royce presented him with a copy of the Book of Lies, which is one of Crowley's best mystical texts. And allegedly, some of the secrets of the OTO are written in plain sight there. Crowley would say that he had no idea, and so possibly it was just something that was, some sort of divine revelation that he received. And that's when Royce decided to appoint him the leader of everything. I'm simplifying the story, especially because we really don't know if this ever happened like this, right? Crowley was a fantastic writer and a fantastic storyteller. So whenever we look at these histories, a lot of it is mirrored in Crowley's diaries, which are available in various collections around the world. Here in London, they're available at the Warburg collection, which, despite what some people will tell you, you can access them quite easily. In fact, it's called the York collection at the Warburg Institute. Sorry, that's the correct name. And so, you will find these tales in his diaries, but then again, was he spinning his own myth, or was he telling the truth? We'll likely never know. What we know, for instance, is that the Book of Lies was never published up until 1913. So how would Theodore Royce be able to have a copy 1 year before? It's some things doesn't really match there. Anyway, Crowley becomes the leader of the British section of the OTO, and thanks to Roy's encouragement, he becomes to make it Thelemic. What do I mean by this? As I told you, the OTO was founded by Freemasons and Rosicrucians, right? So in many ways, at the beginning, it was only a system of synthesis of the Masonic degrees of the Scottish Rite, of the Memphis Mizraim Rite. So imagine like Scottish Rite has 33 degrees. The Memphis Mizraim Rite or Egyptian Rite can go up to 99 degrees. So you can imagine there's a lot of material there. What this group of Freemasons and Rosicrucians in Germany set out to do was to synthesize everything in 9 degrees, which was a very lofty task, right, to undertake. And also, they were trying to bring in all those teachings of yoga, Tantra, that were starting to seep in from the East at the time. We're talking about the early 20th century, 1903, 1904, something like that, so very early times. Crowley comes in. Of course, he was studying this material already, and Thelema is really is seeped into the mysteries that come from the East, from Tantra and from I would say Buddhism, etc., right? So by Thelemizing, I mean like he started to take these Masonic rituals and change them in their, let's say, in their allegories, in their symbology, like leaving behind all the Masonic symbology that's usually tethered to Christianity. For those of you who don't know, 99% of Freemasonry is pretty much stories from the Bible, okay? Mostly Old Testament as well. And Crowley was like, well, this is good. The system it works, but how about we make all these stories, we make them Thelemic. And so without going too much into what I cannot divulge publicly, let's say that the OTO is a system of Thelemic Masonry in many ways. In that sense that you join an order whereby slowly but slowly, as almost like you go by degree on a clock, right? So that's why they're called degrees, because slowly you're shown the entirety of the mysteries by little increments, okay? And each degree builds up on the previous one, and so by the time you are, I don't know, 4th degree, you're given a series of instructions that make sense as a whole, but you still know that you don't have the full picture of it, right? And this is the Masonic way of imparting, I would say unlocking the mysteries for those who are initiated into their ways. And this is what happens in the OTO as well. You are, interesting enough, there's one degree at the very beginning called the Minerval degree, which is a name that actually comes from the Bavarian Illuminati. Has nothing to do with the Bavarian Illuminati degree. It's very different. However, in that degree, you're kind of given most of the secrets already, but at the beginning you don't know. So when you go back at the end of the system, what you've done at the very beginning, it's almost like as I say, it's almost like going around the clock, and so you're back at the beginning, but now you have a deeper understanding of what the system is really about. And the OTO system really teaches you the principles of light, life, love, and liberty in the sense of Thelema. So, liberty of the individual. Every man and every woman is a star, which is from one of the 3 most important aphorisms from the Book of the Law and of Thelema. The other 2 being, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, and love is the law, love on the will, which I'm pretty sure everybody heard by now, and they're quite famous. But again, liberty, so the idea that every man and every woman is a star, we all have the same potential to unlock our stardom, like our divine self. The fact that, life, we have to engage in life. There's no nihilism in Thelema, and there's definitely no nihilism in Thelema as unlocked and present to you in the OTO teachings. You have to engage with life. You have to really live life to the fullest. Love is complex because the love of Thelema is agape, as opposed of eros, as opposed of philos, which are
the 3 kinds of love in ancient Greek.
Exactly, they're different. Exactly, the ancient Greek, I think it's seven ways of saying love, and it's very interesting because, of course, philos is the love that you can have for a friend, for a brother. Eros is the love you can have for your beloved, for the person you are in. You're engaged. I mean, also everybody you fancy, if we want to use like a English term.
It's more of a sexual interest.
There's a sexual interest, exactly. And agape, it's something that it's more like the love for the creation itself, the love and all its parts, right? So it's a more all-pervading love for everything. Life, and then there's light. Light is intended, as the source of that stardom, so that intimate divine spark that it's found everywhere. And it's almost like there's this light is, as light expands immediately everywhere, this divine spark is the center of a circumference that extends infinitely, and so that center is everywhere. And this interpoint between this point and circumference, it is the interplay between Hadith, the point, and Nuit, the circumference, which are, by the way, Nuit, I have it.
Yeah, I was looking at your
Elite.
Yes.
And so and again, like you have these ideas that are presented to you again and again and again in different ways. They can take the form of Egyptian gods, and there will be a lot of people that are they're very like peculiar about saying, well, Thelema is in fact the Egyptian mysteries that are presented to us once again. They're like a revival of the Egyptian mysteries. And there are people like me that say, well, maybe, or maybe simply, these principles are universal, and the fact that Crowley, was so steeped in the Egyptomania of the Victorian time and Edwardian time, that's how this principle imprinted onto him, through these masks. The reality there is that I'm very agnostic in the sense that I don't know if there is a resurgence of ancient Egyptian Heka, which was the name for magic, right, in those times, in Thelema or not. Definitely, the rituals of Thelema are, as much as I know, right? I might be wrong, but as much as I know, the rituals of Thelema have nothing to do with Egyptian Heka. So, while at the same time, this idea of this all-pervading force, this all-pervading light that is divided into these 2 points, almost as for us to entertain the idea of duality before transcending duality itself, that makes more sense to me. And in fact, it's more close to what you find in Tantra, and I think that's more the, if we were to find like an historical beginning for Thelema, before Crowley, going back to a long strand of tradition passed from person to person to person. Yeah, ideas scattered around the world by cross-pollination, cross-fertilization, etc., etc. I would say that possibly we should look more towards India and those traditions as the source of Thelema. But again, we really don't know. What we know, and what I can tell you as a practitioner, is that it works. And by what do I mean by it works? Those rituals have power behind them. Like if you engage with them, if you try to understand them properly, and if you don't expect, I don't know, to throw fireball from your hands, which is something that from time to time you hear people on the internet, right?
Even in person sometimes.
Exactly. If you don't expect that magic will create the impossible. This ritual work because Thelema gives you, first of all, frees you from almost 2,000 years of Christian indoctrination that the body is evil, that the life has to be, you should forsake life, and you should just wait for, someone else to come and save the day and guide you to the realm of heaven. Thelema tells you, this life is what we have. There might be something else, but we don't know. So we have to live this life to the fullest without it becoming hedonistic for the sake of it, but without even forcing out any sort of pleasure that we might encounter, right? And the idea that's so crucial of the Thelema, that every man and every woman is a star, implies that we should not trample our fellow man. And by man, of course, I mean fellow human, member of the human race, right? And we should remember that divinity is in everyone, right? Unfortunately, I can tell you that this has not always been understood this way in Thelema. And I think that going back full circle back to the OTO, maybe it's also a little bit the fault of OTO. It's been 40 years now, more or less, the 85, when the OTO was finally able to solidify itself into one main organization. As you can imagine, when we think about magical orders and esoteric organizations, there's always splinters, there's always schisms, but around 85, there was a landmark copyright case that was won by a group of people in the United States, and they started to reorganize the OTO as one OTO. Unfortunately, I would say they haven't done a great job in the last 40 years, and they haven't been able to to become that guiding light that maybe Thelema needs in order to make sure that the true message is understood by everybody who approaches Thelema. In the third chapter of the Book of the Law, which is our central text, you can read a lot of things that might be read in two different ways, because the third chapter of the Book of the Law is the one whereby Kuit, or Horus, the warrior, speaks in very fiery and very warlike terms. But it's beyond doubt for me that those has to be understood as a way for us to master ourselves, right? There's some excerpts in the Book of the Law that says, trample the weak and the wretched. And a lot of people, especially in recent years with all the resurgence of the alt-right, etc., they read that in a way of like, Thelema can be a way to be a white supremacist, can be a way to be a person that just live by the idea of that might is right? And that couldn't be further from the truth. And at the same time, I feel that the OTO kind of dropped the ball on being very clear about these things. So yeah, I don't know if this answers your question, right? But...
Yeah, I was also wondering how many degrees are in the OTO, and you said that the further you advance, the more you have a full picture of the mysteries. But is there any other way you could define the progression through the degrees, and what's the ultimate goal that you achieve at the final degrees?
So in the structure of the OTO, there are 9 degrees that ideally you could complete. There's then a 10 degree, which is considered to be an administrative degree only. So only for people that have to do specific jobs get to the 10 degree. And then there's an 11 degree, which is meant to be, it's said to be outside the scope of the order itself. What are you going to do if you go from degree 0 to degree 9? You are given the full understanding of how to properly live a Thelemic initiatory experience, okay? You start in the Minerval degree, let's say, what can I say, with the stating that you are traveling towards the city of the sun. You're traveling towards, pretty much towards, the union with the divine, right? That's what you're trying to do. You're a seeker of wisdom, and you're traveling towards that place, because it is the place whereby you will learn, you will achieve wisdom, okay? And this is what the OTO wants to do it. Across the various degrees of the OTO, the history changes, because it is the allegories that are presented to you are always meant to show the idea of there's a strong antinomian vibe throughout all the degrees, and so let's say you are, in order to travel through the city of wisdom, you want to join a group of people called the Templars, because you think that the Templars are the ones having wisdom. But the first things that happens is, in fact, you are forced to become allied with the enemy of the Templars. I'm not going into too much detail, but just so this idea of always changing the expectation, reversing what you expect, and by reversing what you expect, you are taught wisdom by always being reminded that you should contemplate 2 different points of view in order to annihilate them, because neither one is the truth. Neither one holds that wisdom that you are seeking, but in fact, the annihilation of those 2. Let's say those 2 illusory, that illusory duality actually is the key to wisdom. Another thing that that the OTO promises you is that in the higher degrees, from the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th, you are taught the secrets of sexual magic and sexual alchemy. That means all the juicy bits that people read about on how to use sex as a way of creating magical talismans, as a way of creating as a way also creating the kind of elixir of long life that you read about in alchemical text, as a way of creating the philosopher's stone. I cannot go into more detail, as you can imagine, but this is the promise, right? So why would you join the OTO? Well, this is all the reasons why you would join the OTO. Now, can you do this nowadays? Unfortunately, in my experience, you can't, for a series of reasons. The OTO that, as I said, you can join today, the one I eventually joined, the one that was reconstructed in 1985, it is a reconstruction, because the OTO kind of disappeared. With the death of Crowley, only one person was declared his direct, the heir, the person who would take over from him. It was his disciple Karl Germer, Father Saturnus. Karl Germer didn't do anything to further the OTO. In fact, he let it die. And after he died, a lot of the magic of OTO died with him. Also because when he died, and this is a classic history of what happens in magical orders, after he died, his house was raided by a group of people that pretty much stole Crowley's writings, Crowley's diaries, Crowley's papers. They were all stored at Karl Germer's house. And these people went on to become rather notorious in occulture history as the Solar Lodge. The Solar Lodge had some kind of ties with Charles Manson and the family. It was never known if these ties were true or not, at least not to my knowledge. I'm pretty sure somebody in the comments would say, actually, but so let me know, because I'm curious about that. But what I know, because I spoke with one of the people that are still alive from Solar Lodge, this guy called Frater Shiva. He's an old man now, still alive. You can find him on lashtal.com, which is one of possibly the last forum, the textual forum that still exists on the internet. And this guy wrote a book called Solar Lodge Outside the Law, something like that. Solar Lodge Outside the Law. Anyway, you can find the book as well. And he gives in very much detail what happened and the fact that, yes, they did steal a lot of secret instructions. And when they realized that they would pretty much have legal problems because of their connections, with the failed Summer of Love of 69 and all the proto-satanic panic of the 70s, they had problems with the FBI, just to let you know. They just burned it all. So whenever you join the OTO today, there's huge things are missing. I've always remembered that, for instance, when I was initiated into the perfect initiate degree, so it's like 4+1, you literally receive a little piece of paper that says, according to this degree, you should be given all the secrets of these degrees of Freemasonry. We don't have them. If you do have them, please share them with us. So just to give you an idea, this is that's the reality of OTO. And when I left right around that time, and after I left the OTO, several top tier people left as well. And one of these people, this person, shared with me all the other degrees, right? By the way, you can find them all online. It's very easy. But I would argue that reading the degrees won't do you any good. You really need to understand. Imagine like it's all written in code, right? Not so much as a cryptography. It's plain English. But when you speak of the gluten of the eagle and the red lion, that means something very specific, which are specific sexual fluids. So if you're not aware of that kind of code that's used in the word, well, maybe you won't make much sense of what's presented to you. Anyway, I was given the other degrees. I was presented the other degrees, and I can tell you there's bits that are missing, possibly because Crowley never wrote them, or possibly because it was just an oral tradition that has been lost in time. And possibly because maybe it was written in these documents that were in possession of the Solar Lodge that got all burned. So would I still join the OTO? Possibly yes, because especially if you never joined a magical order, you can scratch that itch and see certain things that you wouldn't see anywhere else. But, with the knowledge I have today, it's also true that, what says on the tin, I think it's undeliverable because they cannot teach you all the secrets of to create the philosopher's stone and to create the elixir of long life, etc., etc., etc. I also have to say that the experience is very different from lodge to lodge. This is the same thing in Freemasonry. People that are not Freemasons and people that are not member of the OTO tend to think of these two organizations as monolithic structures, right? There's the Freemasonry, there's the OTO. Yes and no. Depends on the lodge that you depends on the lodge you join. If you are here in London, we had good people, right? I've heard that in other places around the world, things were not that good. And I'm not even going into the discussion of whatever almost invariably happens in hierarchical structures, where there's always nepotism, there's always some sort of abuse going on, which is why I don't believe in hierarchical structures anymore, really. But, the kind of instruction would vary massively from London to Liverpool. And yes, I am mentioning something that I know directly. So that's the problem, right? So it really is. Are you winning the lottery to join the right lodge or not? That's a problem there as well.
And what about the AA and its structure and aim? What they are and how it differs from the OTO?
The structure. So the difference is stark in the sense that while the OTO it is set up to be like Thelemic Freemasonry, right? So it's set up around the lodge or the oasis or the camp. So it's set up to be social, right? And it's set up for people to go receive the initiation rituals passively and try to make sense of them in time, right? Like, again, in a degree structure. The AA, it's a magical school. The AA, it's something whereby, first of all, there's no lodge structure whatsoever, at least in Crowley's original idea. You were only supposed to know your direct superior, which means like your teacher, and in time you would only get to know those who were assigned to you as your students. I can tell you this is yet another myth, because in this day and age, it's impossible to keep this kind of connection secret. Everybody speaks about it on the internet. There's AA groups, there's AA Facebook groups, forums, whatever. And it's been like this for the last 20 years, really. The difference is also that there's no, with two exceptions, there's no group rituals. Okay, the two exceptions are the first two grades of the AA, and they're named grades and not degrees because each one is a self-contained experience, and it is something that, in fact, once you go through it, you are graded with it. Like you have to go through it, and you have to show that you fully understood the lessons there. So, for instance, while the OTO is, as I said, is very passive, in the AA. And you cannot really fail the degrees of the OTO. I mean, from time to time, you just have to wait a set amount of time. Maybe you have to read something, but that's about it. Well, in the AA, you can fail it. Like if there's grades of the AA where, for instance, you are supposed to show your skills in pranayama or in asana. So you have to stand still with a jug of water on your head for 1 hour, and if you're not able to do that, you won't be graded. You won't pass that grade. You can do it again, of course, but that's it. Like you have to show your skills. Also, the AA is incredibly academic in a way. Like the syllabus of the AA, I would say it's very antiquated right now, but it's something in excess of 200, 300 texts that you need to show proficiency with them, right? And it goes from things like from Crowley's text to the spiritual lesson of Michael Molinos to Patanjali and to the vast, I mean, he goes to Hargrave Jennings, everywhere. Like it's very, very, it really is like you, at the very, even before you join the AA, you should show a mastery of theme of religions, really, because that's what you are trying to do. You're trying to learn magic in the sense that magic is the core, the secret core of religion itself, right? The kernel of a religion, if you want. So the grades of the AA also are different from the degrees of the OTO. They are 11 because they are each tied to each of the Sephirot of the Tree of Life. Similarly to the grades of the Golden Dawn, the structure of the grades, it's very similar. The scale is different, and by that I mean that if you were to do the first 6 degrees of the Golden Dawn, you would only be a second grade of the AA. I mean, I don't want to go too much in, this is going to be boring, but let's say the scale is different, right? And this is implied idea that Thelema, the teachings of Thelema do bring you past the limits of the teachings of the Golden Dawn. The teachings of the Golden Dawn really brought you to the sun, to the sphere of Tiferet, right? And I think I can speak freely of Sephirot. I mean, everybody here, you told them about the Sephirot already.
Yeah,
so.
I will link one of my videos.
Exactly, good idea. So, but yes, like, the Golden Dawn brings you from Malkuth to Tiferet. And of course, after the Golden Dawn died and its splinter groups, other people like Felkin and others did bring in the degree that go up to Bina, even beyond. When by the AA from the very beginning almost implies that you are already at Yesod, and you're going to work very fast towards the point of knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, which happens in Tiferet, and then your goal is to enter Bina, across the abyss, realizing the non-dual nature of the universe, and understanding the mystery of Babylon. Big name, by the way. We say Babylon for the first time 1 hour in. That's not too bad. And so, like the mystery of Babylon, and that's kind of the end of it when you become a Magister Templi, a master of the temple. There are 2 more degrees, grades, the grade of Magus and the grade of Ipsissimus. It's very contentious if those grades are even accessible, and I'm a Thelemic heretic for saying so. But I'm not even sure that those grades are earthly grades, like the kind of enlightenment and the idea that you have integrated non-duality. I mean, how can you integrate non-duality if you're still in a body that have an internal monologue, right? Anyway, like I said, I'm rumbling once again. These are the 2 main differences between the AA and the OTO. The OTO is Thelemic Masonic system that will let the initiate understand the mysteries by grades and by allegories and by symbols, whereby the AA is a system that gives you the keys of the Lamborghini. Say, okay, go, you do magic and see and show us what you can do. I mean, there's some tests to do whereby you say, hey, join us in the astral temple and tell us what you see. If you are able to do it, you pass the test. If you're not able to do it, you will have to go back and study harder and do the practices harder, I would say. So this is the stark differences between the 2.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And you also mentioned, I think, that the OTO is less magical in a way, more ritualistic.
Yes, in the sense that, okay, first of all, this is my opinion. I want to state it because it's very
contested.
You will ask like 5 different people, you will get 50 different answers.
Oh, that's typical of historic practitioners, pagans, and
exactly. I would say that there's a lot of magic in the OTO. Like the rituals of initiation are magical. And there's one central rite, which is called Liber 15, the Gnostic Mass, commonly known as the Gnostic Mass, which is incredibly magical. It's a Eucharistic ritual, and it's a ritual that really encapsulate pretty much the entire mysteries of the OTO, of all the degrees of the OTO, heavily heavily hidden in allegories for the common people to have a glimpse of them. Okay, but they're very magical in the sense that if you officiate as a priest or a priestess or a deacon in the Gnostic Mass, I think there's a lot of magic going on there. There's visualizations, there's mantras, there's specific each step you take as a specific Kabbalistic reference, and you should, if when you know all of this, you create it like a mandala, like something that really acts magically. The point is that in the OTO you're never expected to do magic. In the lodges that I belong to, especially here in London, in Ameth Lodge, yes, we had magical classes on how to build or access an astral temple. We had some magical classes on how to create a talisman. We had some magical classes on how to create and consecrate our magical tools. But for instance, all these things I told you, those are the things that are found in Book 2 of Magic in Theory and Practice by Crowley. You never find them in the OTO. The OTO really expects you to, enter a room and be receptive of all the things you will see and hear and the things will be done to you. And this is kind of the same things that happen in Freemasonry. You enter a room and you're bombarded with allegories, with symbols, with sounds, and it will take maybe several years to try to really understand what were all the messages, because there's some messages are clear and some messages are hidden. The AA, it really is about do magic in the sense that you have a goal, and the goal is to cross the abyss. Or rather, the first goal is to achieve knowledge and conversation with holier than angel. So unlock that divine spark in you, almost that becoming the conduit for the fire from heaven, to use a beautiful allegory. And then use that conduit to go even further down the road and even leave behind that connection with the holier than angel and enter the womb of Babylon herself or itself. So that's the stark difference. So that's why, I would say the OTO is not, it can be magical, depends on which lodge you join. You can do magic as an extra curriculum, but there's no strict magic in the OTO itself. There's the promise of sex magic when you reach the higher degrees, but very few people reach the higher degrees because of nepotism, because of the nature of hierarchical orders and the fact that very few people make it to the top. Not because it's difficult, but because I think humanity tends to not want to share the fun with everybody else. You do magic from the beginning and you do magic until the very end. You consecrate talismans, you consecrate magical weapons, you speak with angels, you speak with demons. We should even understand what they are, but it's not what people think they are. And you also engage with sex magic as well in the AA at various levels, all towards the goal of transcending humanity, leaving humanity behind, but again, not so much into a become a living god kind of. It's more about really transcending the human nature and becoming one with nothingness, which is Nuit. I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it was pretty informative. And another question that I have is, what role does magic plays in the spiritual advancement of a Thelemite that is in the OTO and in the, well, not, either or, I mean, in the OTO and in the AA? Yeah, how does it differ, the role that magic plays in spiritual evolution, spiritual advancement?
Well, first of all, it's important to say that you can be a member of both. For a while, I was a member of both. Most people, well, maybe not most people, a lot of people are a member of both. Maybe more people would be a member of both if it wasn't for all the lineage wars and you should join this group or don't join that group that comes with hierarchical structures. Magic for a Thelemite, personally, I believe that magic for a Thelemite is paramount. and by that I mean there's all the magical practices that start from learning to sit still, or even learning to walk while meditating, while being aware of your breathing, or being aware of your, or whatever happens in your mind's eye, and try to control them, try to have, try to still the reactive mind, going to ceremonial magic practices that, I guess, like we mentioned before, like the consecration of the tools, learning, for instance, to use the pentagram rituals, not so much as just banishing, because it's not about just about that, but like learning how to, the pentagram rituals can help you refine the hermetic elements, and you can bring them into your aura or body of light, and these practices will enhance your body of light. I would say that without this, there's no Thelema. Again, personal opinion. In recent years, what I noticed is that since magic hasn't been able to become as widespread as Crowley hoped to be back when he wrote Magic in Theory and Practice, Liber Abba, there's been a lot of attempts to, I don't want to say distance Thelema from magic, but remembering that, you can be a Thelemite also if you're not a practitioner, which is absolutely true, by the way. Like, you can, you don't have to do it. But at the same time, to reduce Thelema just to, a quirky philosophy, it's missing the point completely. Crowley really thought that for the next step of human evolution, we had to regain this magical series of practices that, through enlightenment and onwards we lost, right? I think that's it. I think that's absolutely true. The book I wrote, right, the book that's coming out next year, which is called the Aleistercrowley Manual, Thelemic Magick for Modern Times. Yes, it's title. I mean, that's exactly the point I'm making. It's not an academic book by any, absolutely not. It's a book for practitioners, because I think that, what I'm trying to share in that book is the idea that to fully unlock the message of Thelema, yes, you have to do a series of things that might seem crazy, which is, maybe salute the sun 4 times during the day, by virtue of a ritual called Liber Resh, or you should learn to invoke the astral light into your body of light, into your aura, and even trying to entertain the idea that there might be an invisible world around us that we cannot perceive with our 5 senses, but it's there, and we will start to perceive it as we deepen our understanding and our proficiency in these practices. So again, long story short, I think it's absolutely fundamental. And I think that if you reduce Thelema to just a philosophy, you're missing something. And possibly you will get to a point where you won't make sense of certain more advanced lessons, like, for instance, the non-dual nature of our existence, because one way of making sense of non-duality is by stilling the rational mind. Of course, you can go and do it and I don't know, apply for a Zen course and being beaten by a Zen master in order to realize that you are not your body. Or you can actually try to go through all the practices of Thelema, and you get there, because again, that's where we're going towards with Thelema. So yeah, if you want to be a Thelemite, I think you should be a Thelemic magician.
Sounds like an ad.
Yeah, I do. I know.
If you want to be a Thelemite, be a Thelemic magician.
I might make it as an ad for, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but so yeah, I was trying to sort of make sense of the things that you said when it comes to the use of magic in the spiritual advancement of the Thelemite. So, is it the case in your perception that magic helps you achieve the spiritual goals because it allows you to experience you as a human being in a way that is not only related to the physical and dualistic world? Is
Yes.
that what you meant?
Yes, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
what's the role that magic plays when it comes to the kind of magic that is used to alter your reality for, to improve your experience even in the dualistic world?
Well, in my experience, right, the magic of Thelema, it's not so much a magic of results, right? It's not so much like a magic that you do in order to, I don't know, get a better job or get I don't know, another girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. It's basically a series of practices that will almost force you to peel away the layers of your personality. And by peeling all these layers away, going closer and closer and closer, till you become one with that divine spark. Okay, once you do that, or rather as you do that, and finally once you reach that goal, you become one with what we call true will or pure will, as it's written in the book of the law. And that is almost like you find the how do you say, like the trajectory of your entire incarnation. Like why, like you have an answer to the age-old question, what am I doing here? Right? And it's so much more than just finding a purpose in life, which it's something that, it might seem like that. It's more about entering a state of eudaimonia, entering a state of, perfect understanding to a degree of why you're here, where you're going, and being, I don't want to say, like, it's not so much about being happy, because it's not about letting sorrow disappear, but making sense of sorrow. Crowley speaks of the trance of sorrow a lot, which is something that he gets, from Buddhism. The idea is not so much about, getting rid of pain, getting rid of sorrow, but making full sense of why we are experiencing what we're experiencing, and moving on towards this enjoyment of life in all its manifold refractions, which, I mean, I guess that's what magic really is. Why, for instance, just to to maybe close a loop that I started a few sentences ago, well, many sentences ago. Why magic with the K? So why sex magic? Well, because if you think about it, we all experiences this sense of eudaimonia, all of us. The moment of orgasm, la petite mort, to use like a French term, it's that moment of eudaimonia, of absolute bliss, that is still very rooted into our physical senses, but it's a sliver of perfection there. And of course, it's fleeting; it disappears. But we can try to go back there, and Thelema wants to get you back there. Wants to, for you to be able to expand that moment of bliss as long as possible, which is never going to be more than a few minutes, maybe, but still, right? Because the more you go there and the more you extend the period of bliss, the more you can live this life to the fullest. So, for instance, this is why the emphasis on sex magic, because sex it's almost like an alchemical formula that we have embedded into our DNA as humans. We have that, we do that, right? So, using it magically and using it with full understanding can help us making sense of who we are right now. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I was also thinking that sex is also the union of the opposites, and it's also not necessarily in a heteronormative way, but I mean the opposite in terms of two people that are different and they get united and they get pleasure after out of that union.
I mean,
So it's also a way of experiencing union in the separation. And so in that
absolutely.
sense,
One fundamental icon of Thelema is Baphomet, right? Baphomet is the union of the opposite. He is the high and the low, is the male and the female, beyond gender as well, like as you know, as cosmic principles. But again, it's an embodied form. So yes, absolutely. True, you cannot transcend duality unless you have fully experienced duality, right? Crowley would go even further, and like he was a cross-dresser, right? He was a gender fluid individual by any means, and so he went even further to the idea that you really have to alchemically experience polarities constantly and bring them into the athanor and have them collide in order to for that illusion of separation dissipate completely. It's internal alchemy at its finest, and that's what magic is, with the K. I tend to call this also theurgy, maybe, but I use theurgy in a very wrong way in my own it's my own meta language, right? Because I want to separate it from what I call sorcery, which it's
like,
also,
is it like a high magic, low magic kind of distinction?
it's a terrible divide, but it helps you
it's very
understand.
ceremonial centered in a way, because it assumes that the magic that deals with changing and affecting things in your reality is low. So the high low sort of implies that one is
Which is
better
why
than the
I
other.
don't, I don't like the term high and low. Again, in the book, I speak of theurgy versus sorcery, and the fact that, for instance, everything that you find in Thelema is theurgical, right? There's nothing in Thelema, literally nothing, to my knowledge, and then again, somebody maybe will correct me here, that will help you get a better job. Crowley used a lot of 9-degree operations, which is heterosexual, generative sex magic, to power talismans in order for him to get money or get better jobs and whatnot. But that's only a fuel for talisman magic, right? Which is sorcery in many ways. The real use of the kind of sexual energy would be only to fuel this sort of ascension, right? But again, I hear what you're saying, whereby there's this kind of idea that everything that just gets you a better job is wrong. I'm not saying that at all. I've done it many times. I've done sigils. I keep doing sigils. But the reality there is that the deeper I go into these practices, and like I told you, it's been 30 years now, maybe 25 series, but still, the less sigils I do. Because I am more and more getting into a state where I am where I'm supposed to be. I deal with grief and I deal with happiness at the same, almost like I don't want to say detachment, because detachment is such a loaded term. Like, oh, you just like become completely detached from everything. No. I lose myself into that. I lose myself into that experience, but I don't identify with it anymore. So when
That's very Buddhist.
Sorry?
That's very Buddhist.
Yes, but I really think that Thelema has a lot. That's why I said at the beginning, I think that the real roots of Thelema are in the East, not so much in Egypt. Because first of all, we know very little of Egypt. So maybe if we ever know more of Egypt, maybe we can see, yes, it's the same. But that's where I think the roots are. I think Gordon Djukjevic wrote a book on that, about the roots of Thelema in, I would say, in Tantra and Buddhism, and he was right. My opinion, of course.
Yeah, but yeah, that's very interesting. And also something that I often say in conversations with my patrons is that in Western esotericism, you will find that many traditions will say that they draw back to ancient Egypt. It's like, it sort of became kind of a a recurring theme to make it seem as though your tradition dates back to the very beginning of magical practices, because Egypt was identified as this sort of primary original source of magical practices. So it was sort of this imagined perception of Egypt as the source of it all that then
I think
allowed
it's
for
a very orientalistic approach as well, right? Because it's like,
and
that's
exoticizing. I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
it's another trend that you find even in shamanism. The idea that when something is foreign and comes from a different place, a different mindset, we have the West versus East here, but something that is exotic and is far away and is distant from your mundane world has more of a mystical appeal, because it seems like it's not the banal, trivial thing that you have in front of your eyes every day. It's something that goes beyond. And so you can also imagine more around it, because it's not something that you're super familiar with. It's something that there's a degree of imagination that goes into the perception of things that are exotic or perceived as exotic.
And the idea, though, also that the older it is, the better it is. Like, I mean, that we've been experiencing this grimoire revival in recent years, right? Maybe like 10 years or so. And I think there's been a lot of fantastic scholarship coming out from that. Thinking about Jake Stratton-Kent's, Encyclopedia Goetica, especially Geosophia. All the things that come in from ADM Press, they're fantastic, right? The study of the PGM, fantastic. But at the end of the day, as a practicing magician, that I only work with the Goetia and with the Arbatel and few others. But the Goetia, the Arbatel are the main ones that I work with. I work right now. Like, I don't have Patreon anymore. I have a community, but in my community we do that a lot. It's like, besides that, what do we really need to go and find yet another obscure grimoire because it's the first grimoire? I mean, we don't know where this come from. Like, we have no idea but it's not just because they're older, they're better, right? Especially even when we look, for instance, at the Goetia, like there's like 160 various different recensions of it. Which one is the best? Possibly the best approach is rather to do the magic and get in touch with the spirit. If you allow that's something that can happen, right? And then maybe the spirit will tell you what to do, which has been my experience, by the way.
So thank you so much for this interview, Marco. And where can people find you if they want to reach out?
So first of all, thank you once again for having me. It's been quite a nice chat about lots of different subjects.
Yes.
Where people can find me, I have my own website called, you can find me online, of course, magick@marcovisconti.org, or if you go directly on my website, marcovisconti.org, there are links there. And let's say like my first book is going to come out next year, February 2023. Can't believe it's already 2023, right? And it's going to come out from Watkins Publishing. The title is The Aleistercrowley Manual, Thelemic Magick for Modern Times. And let me think what else. Yes, I'm on YouTube. I'm on social media. I really don't have a YouTube channel. I am on YouTube from time to time. I'm not very good at updating things. Oh yes, and then I'm doing a magical course. Like if you wanna learn something practical, come and see on my website. We're starting in a few weeks actually, on the 21st of September. And yeah, that's where people can find me.
Thank you. And I will put the links in the info box so that viewers will have an easier time finding it. So thank you again. And I hope all of you guys enjoy this conversation, and leave us a comment so that we know what you thought about it and whether you have any questions or observations.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. So this is it for today's video. I hope you liked it. And if you did, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell so that you will never miss a new upload from me, and share the video with your friends so that they can know about this community and maybe they are interested in the academic study of magic, esotericism, and all things occult. Thank you for being here, and stay tuned for all the academic fun. Bye for now. Till